Let's talk about some of the greatest books of all time. And I should also give a shout out to an excellent podcast you did with Sonia Walger, who's a friend of yours, but she had a great podcast. She has guests pick their 5 favorite, most impactful books and so on. You picked 5 fiction books, one for each decade of your life. For the audience, they should go listen to that conversation. But you picked Winter Holiday by Arthur Ransom. Second one was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Then Tender is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The Thin Red Line by James Jones. And Middlemarch by George Eliot. But just zooming out, reflecting back on that conversation, what do you think if an alien came? What are some candidates for books that you would recommend to them?
Middlemarch. It's the best novel written in English. War and Peace. It's one of the best novels written in Russian, I would argue. I think both of those are, because if you've only got one book, you want a long book.
Yeah, true.
And they're both books that kind of, it's something I was always trying to put into games, and that feeling of all of life is here. You've got love, death, violence, romance, the whole human experience in different ways. So I think that there's something amazing about Vanity Fair. I used to love the novel, not the magazine, because same thing. All of life is here.
You also spoke highly of F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway.
I was obsessed by them in my 20s. Yeah, completely obsessed,
as one must be. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think them as a double act is so amazing. One helped discover the other and then died first, and then suddenly it died in obscurity and then was rediscovered as a genius while the other one was still alive and falling into not obscurity but into decline. I think it's that their relationship is itself very novelistic.
That by the way is a phenomena of writing, maybe no longer, maybe still, that people like Franz Kafka who died in obscurity, like all these writers who died in obscurity, nobody knows them, and they become famous later.
Yeah,
that is just so interesting. That's such an interesting, that Franz Kafka and Franz Kafka in particular is fascinating because he wanted all of his work to be burnt, like destroyed. So that insecure. Speaking of the critical voice, is just, and I think he's one of the best writers of the 20th century. Of course, the dystopian novels are really interesting. 1984, Brave New World.
Love 1984. Had never listened to it or read it, and then I think I did it on Talking Book, or I maybe read it, I can't remember, during COVID, and I think I did both, became obsessed by it. And it's got elements of that creeping into A Better Paradise. But it's so good. I hadn't realized how good it was.
Yeah.
And it's so of the moment.
It's almost like because of its fame, and it's almost like cliche, and you think of the caricature.
English. And I remember the year 1984, and you're like, I remember the song, it's too much.
Yeah,
it can't be that good. And then it was that. I came to it completely cold, just, I should work my way through this because it's another classic I haven't read. And then it's incredible.
And the book I've read more than any other book is Animal Farm by George Orwell. I don't know why exactly, but the childlike fairy tale telling of totalitarianism.
Well, you grew up in a communist country.
Yeah, maybe that's it, the roots of it.
I remember, I was a kid in the Cold War in London, and we were always terrified of Eastern Europeans. You were going to come and kill us all. And then I ended up marrying a Pole.
Yeah,
and we had Ukrainians, who worked for us and worked with us, and we were sitting a few years ago, sitting around a campfire in upstate New York, with the campfire was built by our old nanny's husband, who's Ukrainian, and he'd been in the Red Army. I was like, history is so strange that you end up. The Red Army used to be the ultimate enemy. And we're now just hanging out with it. Everything changes. You think these things are permanent, and they're really not.
Yeah.
We face some of that now, where you think these structures are permanent, and they're going to change.
And you also mentioned that the 3 great World War II books are The Thin Red Line, Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman, and The End of the Affair, Graham Greene. What makes for a great war book?
I think World War II is interesting because it affects everywhere, obviously. And so you can get all these different kinds of stories. And there's so many good. I was just trying to come up with a range of one American, one British, one Eastern European, just to get different perspectives. But there's so many amazing World War II books about all kinds of stories. I think the most complete one, because it is this all of life being there, probably is Life and Fate, which is amazing.
And it was written by Vasily Grossman. He experienced Stalingrad firsthand, and there's also just a deep philosophical component.
And the bit in Treblinka is one of the most harrowing sections of any book I ever read. And it really, almost more than any other piece of art around the Holocaust, made me feel what you would feel like at that moment. And it's just an incredible piece of humanism.
And also just, I mean, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It seems like that context reveals in the most pure way human nature, and like what kind of, in Man's Search for Meaning is when everything is taken from you, the little remains of love for, in this case, his wife, is the thing that is a little flame that burns. And Vasily Grossman is small acts of kindness is the thing that allows the human spirit to persist.
I love the bit in Life and Fate when you get, obviously it's in this Stalinist period, and so they're all losing. They all know that what they thought was going to be wonderful about the revolution isn't going to happen. So there's a whole, and everyone's scared of being killed by Stalin because it's post the purges. But then you get these guys and they're trapped in a building fighting in Stalingrad. And so they know at this moment they're dead anyway. And they get to live like pure, perfect Marxist communists away from Stalin and all his nonsense. And I thought that section is incredible because you realize, like, in some ways, in all of its horrors, the most disappointing thing about the 20th century in some ways was the absolute failure of communism. It was because it was such a, quote unquote, beautiful idea, and it just did not work time and time again. And these people who fought for it and then saw it not working, I think they're sort of fascinating characters. All of the revolutionaries from 1917 that were then killed by Stalin, which was all of them apart from him and Lenin.
And that was, people in modern day politics talk about communism like it's trivial that it would lead to atrocities, but I don't think it's that trivial. It's this idealism of humans.
Yeah.
It's like, why can't we all get along? There's a real compassion behind it. There's real love. And what you realize is it's a real study, the 20th century, of human nature, that unfortunately at scale, that kind of compassion is abused by centralized power. So there's a dictator always in that context, in those, given that set of technologies, a dictator arises and does the opposite of what the promise of the ideal is supposed to be.
Well, I think I thought a lot about that then, because I was taught by all these disappointed communists, after 89, all of these English communists, were all like having to accept, discovering all these atrocities had happened in, so it always fascinated me. And then you think about complexities or where one's own values are in the modern moment. And I say, without from and whether either of them, any what we would call left now or call right now, does it have any bearing on the sort of communist era of those words? And I would say probably not. I think that things have changed, but fundamentally, the one value that I would think is worth fighting for is whenever either side starts to move towards thought control, move away. That's never the right outcome. The never right outcome is, oh, you've said the wrong thing, you should be removed now. That should never, ever be a thing we should lean towards.
Yeah, it does seem like individual freedom is a prerequisite
for happiness.
For happiness, and a flourishing of a larger society. Yeah. So there's, like you said, 1984 is pretty, I mean, it's a caricature.
But it is brilliant.
It's actually also just a good story. That's my criticism of Brave New World. It's just poorly written. But I like Brave New World probably applies more to the 21st century than does 1984.
I think 1984 with the fake wars and the way that it revealed that everything in it was a setup for him. Yeah. There's something, if he could have seen the internet, there's something, it's like an analog internet, that world they build around the main character.